So adding and subtracting radicals is a little bit more complicated than multiplying and dividing, but it's not too bad, okay? So we're gonna go through this top section here and fill in these blanks. I'm gonna use a bunch of vocab terms that we've been talking about, okay? So like radicand and coefficient, things like that. Okay, so I'm gonna write those words and I'm gonna explain to you every time I use one, I'll remind you what it stands for. If you won't remember what a radicand is or what a coefficient is, you should add an extra note to yourself so that you will know that when you look at it later, okay? I'm not going to write in what they are because we've been talking about it for a while. But if you don't think you're going to remember, you should add that to your notes. Okay, so you can only add and subtract radicals that have the same radicand. Okay, so a radicand, remember, is the number inside of the radical, like the 2 is here. Okay, so that's what a radicand is. If you aren't going to remember that later when you go to look at this notes, then you might want to write yourself a little note so that you'll have that. Okay, so they have to have the same radicand, the same number on the inside. So what we're going to do is we're going to simplify the radicals separately, and then we'll add the coefficients. Okay, and the coefficients are the numbers in front of the radicals. Okay, so you add the numbers that are in front of the radicals together. Okay, you keep the radicand, right, the number on the inside, you keep that the same. Okay, so it's a lot like just simplifying problems. So pretend the simplified radicals are just variables. This is a lot like if I gave you a problem like 3x plus 2x, right? When you simplify that problem, you add the 3 and the 2 to 5, but it just stays in x, right? Nothing fancy happens with the x, it just stays the same. Very similar to what we're going to do here, okay? So like, let's go ahead and jump to this middle problem. This middle problem right here, right? This is just like what we do if it was 3x plus 4x, right? You add the 3 and the 4 and get 7, and then you leave the radical part the same. Okay, so you leave it as a square root of 2. It doesn't become a square root of 4. You don't add those numbers. You just leave it the same. And that's it. Okay, this guy over here, square root of 5 plus the square root of 5. Don't forget, there's a little imaginary invisible 1 there, right? If there's no number in front, you can assume it's a 1. So I'm going to add 1 and get 2. And then it stays the square root of 5. So 1 square root of 5 plus another square root of 5 is 2 square roots of 5. Okay, so those were really easy. Now this third one, I can't just subtract these right away because they don't have the same radicand. This one has an 18 and that one has an 8. Okay, and what you can't do, you can't like subtract the 2 and the 4 and then subtract 18 and 8. That does not work. You can't do that. Okay, so what we're going to do instead is we're going to simplify each of these radicals separately and see if when they're simplified, maybe they will be the same thing. Okay, so let's start with this one. I'm going to ignore the 2 and just do the 18. So I'm going to birthday cake my 18. 2 goes into that 9 times. 3 goes into that 3 times. And then 3 goes into that once. There's my pair. So I'm going to have a 3 on the outside, a 2 on the inside, and then don't forget to bring that 2 down. All right, there's one of them. Now let's do the other one. So 8, 2 goes into that 4 times, 2 goes into that twice, 2 goes into that once. There's my pair. So I'm going to have a 2 on the outside, a 2 on the inside, and don't forget to bring down your 4. And this minus sign here, that just comes down. All right, so now we can simplify each one of these. So this side, I can multiply the 2 and the 3 and get 6. So that's 6 times the square root of 2. And these ones I can multiply 4 and 2 and get 8. And that's 8 square root of 2, right? And now that I've done that, now I can see that on these simplified ones, now they do have the same radicand. So I can subtract the numbers in the front. So 6 minus 8 is negative 2. Right? 6 buckets of water, 8 fires. You're going to have 2 fires left over. and you leave the radicand the same. And that's your answer. Okay, so that's how you add and subtract radicals. In order to add or subtract them, they have to have the same number inside of the radical. Okay, if they don't, try simplifying them and see if they'll simplify from there. Okay, it might not, but it might. Okay, so sometimes you have ones like this that if you simplify it, you birthday cake each one first, then they'll go together. Sometimes it doesn't always work, but it's always worth checking.